Isn't it time you got to know your technology leaders on a very real level? Welcome to our monthly Third Thursdays podcast series. You're listening to Off the Record with GTRA, and I'm your host, Kelly Yoka. So grab your coffee or cocktail and join us for our casual yet intimate and thought-provoking expose on our top council members, ambassadors, technology innovators, and thought leaders. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. Today, I have a very exciting guest, Ralph Echemendia, known as The Ethical Hacker, actually joining us from Munich, Germany, on site at the set of Oliver Stone's new cybersecurity movie on hackers. So I'm sure we can all guess what that's called. But thanks for joining us, Ralph.
Thanks. Thank you very much for having me. It's always nice to talk to you, Kelly. You go way back. I'm glad that we're still here.
Yeah. How's Munich, and who are some of the actors who are there with you?
Munich is a very cool town, I'll tell you that. It's kind of cold right now, but this movie will be starring Joseph Gordon-Levitt and Shailene Woodley, and it's got quite other great names too involved with, like Zachary Quinto and Nicolas Cage and a few others. So it should be really interesting. Again, these are just some of the names I saw initially when we were doing casting, but we just recently began, so it's a long process, and just the beginning of it. It's I think going to be a great film.
I bet. Well, thank you for dialing in to the Third Thursdays podcast. And you and I go way back. I think we've known each other since my early college days.
It's been a while.
Been a while without dating us. But, you started in the cybersecurity world at such a young age. I mean, your experience started, I think, when you were about 14. I remember hearing stories about you with your ham radio and phone freaking and the old bulletin board system. So let's talk about young Ralph and how you got your start.
Well, yeah, that's basically kind of how it started. I had a friend who was really sort of into, his father was an electrical engineer, and so was his brother, who was about 5 or 6 years older than us. And, we were kind of best friends at the time in, say, junior high school. And he introduced me to ham radio, and that sparked the interest of how things worked and how to use things in a way that were not necessarily, when you're a teenager, not the way it was intended, but also, kind of to screw around sometimes. And so it was interesting that, all this stuff is in the air and there's so much we can do with it. I think one of our little exploits of that time was in actually kind of taking over a Burger King drive-thru. Which, yes, people, by the way, that is technically illegal. The FCC doesn't like it when you jump on a public frequency that's used for things like that. But it was kind of fun learning how those things kind of worked. And then from there, then phone freaking kind of came around. There was a little kind of leaflet. It wasn't even a magazine at the time, but somehow this leaflet kind of made it down to South Florida and Miami, where I grew up. And it was 2600. The Hacker Quarterly now, as it's called, but and this 2600 issue was talking about Captain Crunch and basically the ability to do phone freaking, or basically how to manipulate the phone system, specifically with blue boxes, red boxes, depending on how you used it, but the ability to basically fool the phone system into thinking you put some coins in. Back in the day when we had public phones, right? Yeah. So it kind of started there, and then eventually, once you figured that out well enough to, then the next step was to use these phone lines to dial bulletin board systems, because that was the next thing we heard about was these bulletin board systems that were in California. So we started war dialing until we found some BBSs in California, and when we reached those BBSs, we met other hackers on those BBSs, my friend and I, which now, many years later, I came to find out one of those guys happened to be Kenneth Nick, who I know very well now, but knew him as one of his handles at the time for a brief period of time. And that's kind of where I got my start at. No, at no point, and honestly, it still baffles me that, that was a hobby. At no point in time did I think that it was going to lead to a career. And so it was a while later, at the age of about 20, that I actually then took, at the time, it was a secretarial position at a public relations company, and they happened to be the PR company for Lexmark in Latin America. So that had me going to places where quote unquote real engineers were, from IBM and other, big technology companies, and I would basically go and show them something that they thought was pretty much magic that they couldn't imagine. Well, how did you make that happen on their networks? This is back in token ring days. So it was a lot of fun, and they're the ones that kind of said, "What are you doing working as a secretary for a PR firm with what you know?" And I said, "Well, I didn't realize I knew anything. At least not that was valuable. Obviously now, that's quite changed."
Yeah. Well, and it's obviously nowadays everybody knows about hacking and talking about hacking, but what's really cool is you obviously grew up in the era of the original pioneers for hackers. So, obviously you chose the path of being an ethical hacker, in an era when many kids were hacking into banks and taking down companies. So, let's talk a little bit about, what you're doing now. I mean, one of my favorite stories was your vulnerability assessment of one of the most well-known motorcycle companies, without naming names. It's such a great example for our government and healthcare listeners, and really other CIOs and chief security officers to learn from, because this can happen to all of our, facilities, infrastructure, and network.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, the issue is that for the most part, people tend to, in all industries, including our federal friends and our healthcare friends, and every single industry, they tend to think of this issue of security and hacking as if it were a technology issue, and purely a technology issue, and it is not. It is far from being purely a technology issue. In fact, in many, many cases, it's a procedural problems. There are, there's a lot of human problems in the chain of security, if you will. So, in this example was I had a week basically to land on a Monday, leave on a Friday or a Saturday morning, and in a week with no what we call zero knowledge other than an address and the company's name. My job was to get in. My job was to physically get in, number one, and number two, obviously digitally get in any way whatsoever. This company was pretty locked down. They were in a very, very tall building in Chicago. And, unlike many other situations where, you can walk in behind a cleaning crew, and there's a lot of other ways to do things. But when you're dealing with a big building like this, you have to scope out all the potential and possibilities. So that Monday I got there, threw on a hoodie. By the way, hoodies are not what hackers wear all the time, but that's what the picture looks like most of the time. But, threw on a hoodie just to go upstairs in a way that I wouldn't be recognized, and check out what floors they were on and what those floors look like. Once I scoped that out, intelligence gathering is the very first phase of any hack, no matter whether it's physical or otherwise. So we checked that out. In this case, it was just myself. This would normally be a two-man job, but so I, looked at it and finally reached one of the floors where this organization was, and there was a reception desk. There looked like there was two receptionists there, and I just pretended like stuck my head out, looked in both directions, and pretended like I didn't. I got the wrong floor, right? And that was enough. Now I went back through and started dialing right before 5 and then after 5 until I started getting the voicemail. And during that time, then I started figuring out the voicemail extensions. And then I started dialing different extensions once I figured that out eventually, reaching voicemails. People, obviously, what do they leave on you on your voicemail? Hi, you've reached Kelly, right? So that's a way for us to start enumerating, footprinting the target, from a social engineering perspective. So start making your list, and you do that through, whatever time is necessary to have a good idea of the people. And during that, I did come across a couple of potential vulnerabilities, and that was that, you had what sounded like a pretty high up executive saying, "Hi, this is so-and-so. I will be out of town and out of the country until this date." If you need any assistance, please contact my assistant. Right? Now, that kind of tells me, again, if I'm looking to take advantage, that's a little too much information. You're out of the country up until a certain date. And obviously, this is during the time frame that I'm doing this. So there starts to form the idea of what to do. And there was a couple of other of these type of users, if you will, or employees that had left similar type of messages that gave me information. So ultimately, there was several different avenues that I could have taken, but decided to take the avenue of becoming that person, just for the purpose of setting up access into the building.
Yeah, and it sounds like that. What's really cool and fascinating is that so far you haven't really done anything illegal. And so many people could kind of test the waters and, like you said, try to dial extensions and, find all this information. So, I'm excited to hear and have you share the story about what happens next. But what's interesting is none of this is actually illegal yet. So anyone can pretty much do this.
Oh, yeah. So far, all of this is completely legal. And I guess the illegal part would only be illegal if you caught me, right?
Yep.
So, and even then, of course, we have a, quote unquote, a get out of jail free card, which is the sort of legal document that we use in case you get caught. But that never crosses my mind, meaning I just make sure I set it up in a way where you can't get caught. And there's never been a case where...
Yeah, you're thinking like the mind of a true hacker. So let's talk about the hack.
Yeah, so next thing I do is I basically I go to a nearby consumer location of this brand, and I buy some of their gear. So that I have a little shirt, a polo shirt, and the khaki pants, if you will. And I've got that set up, and then I go to a nearby, FedEx Kinko's, and I find out as much as I can about what their business cards look like, which there was some important things there that I found out, like the fact that they were only black and white, not colored, like you would think they would be. And ultimately made some business cards to make myself an employee of the company at FedEx Kinko's. And then from there, I now started making phone calls again. This went on for a couple of days as the plan kind of came together. And ultimately, what ended up happening is right now I wake up on Friday morning. I've kind of scripted myself for I'm now going to make the first call as this executive who's out of town. Before I make that call, I need to find out what these girls' names are, the receptionists. So the day before, I called in and I pretended to be an office salesman for office supplies and try to get her to transfer me by saying, hey, hi, this is so-and-so with Office Depot. Can you please transfer me to your office manager? We have some specials this month that I really want to make sure she knows about. And her answer was, if you don't know who you're calling and they're not expecting your call, I can't transfer you. Which was a dead giveaway that they have some serious security policies in place. So I said, okay, well, that's fine. Why don't you give me your name? And I'll just send this to you and you can forward to the right person in your organization. She said, okay. What's your name? Mary. And Mary what? And her response was just Mary.
Good. So you said they've done some of this awareness training. So, okay.
Yeah. So right away that told me they've gone to some awareness training, no doubt about it, because this is a receptionist and she knows not to say too much information. But this is enough information. Thank you very much. Okay. I hang up. And then on the following day, on Thursday before the attack, I basically called a friend who lived in that city and said, can you please pop in there and pretend like you're, don't know what's going on and ask them that you're looking for this office, this company, which obviously is not on that floor. And then see if you can get, flirt with the girl. Give me her name. So he ended up going up there and giving me the other girl's name because obviously it couldn't be me because I'm kind of noticeable with the long goatee, and once you've seen it, you know it. So I sent him up. He finally came back and said the other girl's name is, whatever, Felicia, right? So now I have both of their names. Now Friday morning I wake up, I become this person to make the first call. I make the call. I'm using a kind of earplug microphone situation where I can put, a paper over it and kind of rub the paper together to make what sounds like static on the other end. This is all psychology, and this is all, again, manipulating a system, which is our mind in this case. So I call and I say, good morning, this is Mr. So-and-so. When I say that name, I purposely make sure I make noise so that she can't understand very well what the name is. And of course, now since I know the names, I said, hi, is this Mary or so-and-so? Felicia. And so I said, hi, this is Mary. I said, Mary, this is Mr. And I made some noise so she couldn't hear. And immediately she said, I'm sorry, sir, I can't hear you very well. And then I came in loud and clear, this is Mr. Smith, as an example, right? At that point, it was enough for her to believe that this was Mr. Smith. And I said, as you know, I'm currently out of town, and I'm abroad, because obviously I didn't know where he was. I have a very important business process report that needs to be delivered to my office. One of our employees from Plano, Texas, is in town, an IT employee, and I need him to come to the office and upload those very important files for me. That was just a setup, and at that point, as you can imagine, it was a done deal because she believed it. So I basically gave her a visual picture of who this guy would be, gave her a fake name. His name is Chuck. Chuck is going to be Marwin, and I came up with a weird last name. It was kind of funny because so look out for him. I'm going to have him call you because it's the first time he's ever been to this city before, and he's going to need some directions on how to get there. So she's like, oh, of course, sir. Anything else I can do to help you? No? Hang up the phone, wait about 15, 20 minutes, and then now call as this Chuck Marwin. Okay, now call in. I change my voice slightly and say, this is Chuck Marwin. Mr. So-and-so told me to call you. And her response was, yes, sir, we're expecting you. So great, I'm over here at this location. Of course, I chose their consumer facility that I mentioned earlier. And I said, can you give me directions to there? She said, yes. I said, I also have a flight leaving from this airport for this city, which happens to be about 45 minutes away. So how long is it going to take me from the office to the airport? She said, what time is your flight? All of this is on purpose to set up, that
trusted relationship. Yeah.
Exactly. So once that was done, then that was it. It was time to show up. So now I had described myself, or in this case, Mr. Smith had described me before I made that call. And again, most of this I scripted very much like a movie. I thought of every possible way. It's like a chess game, and I've actually scripted it and read through these lines. Of course, I can deviate, and it's intended to go that way, but it's live. There's no cut, right? So now I pop up in the elevator. Obviously, when I'm speaking to her, I'm actually downstairs. And I've got an answer for everything, including not having an ID, but I have my business cards, right? All of these different things that I've already gone through my mind. Then, bing, elevator door opens. I go up and said, hi, I'm looking for Mary. Mary stands up. Hi, I'm Mary. Hi, how you doing? I'm Chuck. And I give her a business card immediately. She looks at the business card. She goes, Marwin, is that Marwin or is it, Mirwin? And I'm like, well, some people pronounce it this way, some people pronounce it that way. And we're making some small talk while I look at my watch. And I say, how long is it going to take me to get from here to the airport? I just want to make sure I don't miss my flight. And immediately that puts urgency. So she's like, oh, yeah, that's right. Let me get you seated. Badge access is, beep. Puts her badge up, gives me access into the good guts of the offices now. Sits me down at a cubicle where I now sit down, connect my computer to their local area network, and have my computer ready to go. It's got a little video that looks like I'm doing a file transfer. In reality, it's scanning their network. It's running all these different scans, automated scans that I had set up already. So now I'm doing that, and then my job is to walk around and take a look and see if anybody's left anything on their desk, if any computers are left unlocked, these type of things, and physically walk into these offices. And that's what I did for the next 2.5 hours. And in 2.5 hours, nobody challenged me. Of course, I did pick a Friday at noon in a city that during the summer everybody's out. So that was all purpose.
Chicago does like to party on Friday afternoon, so well planned.
Exactly. So nobody comes back. So this place was a ghost town. And one of the other things that I was tasked with was to see if I can get physical access into their server and communications room. Now, this is a company that was in 2 different floors, and while I have in other social engineering situations had to like climb through ceiling tiles, I've gotten a bit heavier since last time. So the funny thing about it was that, I walked around. This was an entire floor. Like I said, they had 2 floors, and there was a door that said this door must remain closed, and it was open. Mm-hmm. And when I walked in, it was their server room. So basically what I did is put my business card, my real business card, inside of the taped it in the CD-ROM trays and under the keyboards of every room I had been into.
I love it. So they knew everywhere you had complete and utter access to. Well done.
Even though they wouldn't believe it, when it was time to give them the report, they were like, no way. Yeah. And of course I'm like, well, look under your keyboard.
Yeah.
Like, oh, silence. And no way, you did not get into that room. And then you'd be like, yeah, well, okay, take a look inside the CD-ROM tray.
Yeah. Well, one of my favorite quotes from you, Ralph, was actually at, I believe when you were speaking at another conference, Takedown Con in St. Louis, and you said a very, very good point we all need to take to heart. We are still the weakest link in this chain. You can still secure all of the technology, you can secure all of the processes, yet at the end of the day, we are the weakest link. So it just goes to show that, the end user and the people in person, you can do really good training, but by simple psychology manipulation, you can certainly get access to things that people wouldn't think you could. So let's talk a little bit more about some of your work with, defense and incident response. So let's switch gears now. Give us some examples of some of your work with that, as well as your work with Hollywood and the Anthem and Sony attacks, as well as also the Twilight attack and breach that people don't know about.
Well, yeah, a couple of things. You can kind of bundle those 2 things together. Obviously, from the knowledge of having 20 years now, 25 years, but 20 mostly focused in the attack aspect of it. What it gives you is amazing insight into the defense. You don't really know how to defend yourself unless you know how you can be attacked, and so attacking is key. So about 6 years ago, I got really involved in some very high profile forensic cases that had dealt with intellectual property. In this case, specifically with regards to entertainment intellectual property or pre-release leaks. In other words, the movie still being shot and scenes from the movie get out. That's a big deal because this is, it's a very expensive and legal process. And so one of those was a well-known movie called Twilight, breaking down part 1 and 2. And during their production, they were hacked, and I was the lead technical investigator. There was a lead, which was more of a lawyer and more of a investigator. It was great. And my job was just to look at all the potential digital ways that this happened. So we had to go on set for the first time, obviously a major set, Canada, and be there for quite a bit, interviewing people, looking at their computers, and there was a lot of personal issues there because it's not like a company where you can come in and say, we're going to image all your hard drives. No, most of these people are using personal computers, and they don't want the studio having their other intellectual property. So it was very interesting, especially those who have access to things like dailies, which are what is shot on a daily basis. In the end, this investigation took us a couple of months, and ultimately I was able to trace this back to what turned out to be a Twihard fan back in Argentina. This was public, and that's why we can talk about it. And, in this case, Summit Entertainment, now Lionsgate Gate, basically sued the girl, a 21-year-old girl. And the whole time I said, this doesn't prove, this only proves that she's the leaker. This doesn't prove she's the hacker. But they were happy with just having that. And there is a big difference between the leakers of data and the hackers of data. So not always often enough.
Yeah, well, and obviously this is a Hollywood example, but so many of our listeners are government and healthcare executives. So, I think the takeaway from an example like this is, how this information is so easily leaked and how difficult it is to pinpoint who's responsible and how malicious that attack is. I mean, obviously we're dealing with much more sensitive information with patient records for healthcare and, very critical infrastructures with regard to government. So, this is...
Yeah, in fact, that's the scary part about it, Kelly, is that for the most part, Hollywood's done a better job, even after the Sony hack, obviously, that, everybody knows about that. But they've done a better job at keeping more of their intellectual property from getting out than the government has. I mean, we've had so many. I think the number is somewhere around 49 million social security numbers are out there right now. 1 in 3 people get hacked. 1,000, I think it's 1,090 is the last numbers I saw as far as statistics. 1,090 people get hacked daily.
Wow.
Now that's just saying, people. Those people work in organizations, and those organizations happen to include the healthcare industry, the federal government that also helps in entertainment and manufacturing, and every other possible industry you can think of is made of people. And that's back to the quote, which is, "We are still the weakest link."
Well, and it's quite a conundrum when you hear government talking about things like the Sony hack and other commentators on how involved should the government be in an attack on a private corporation or in the private sector rather, such as Sony. And what's also really interesting is how that affects and impacts decisions and opinions on how much collaboration there should be between the public and private sector. And I constantly hear how government talks about, we really need the private sector companies, the banks that are getting hacked, the hospitals that are getting hacked, to share that information with the public and the government. Yet at the same time, it's also causing additional vulnerabilities by showing that. So what can you say about that?
No, that's a complex issue all over the place. Especially after the Sony hack, where, we've seen a lot of healthcare hacks, and a lot of that is focused on the monetization, if you will, of data, right? In some way, for identity theft, for credit card fraud, for all of that kind of identity-related financial theft. But what we don't often think about, in fact, a lot of people don't realize that your financial identity is one thing, but your digital identity is another. And that's one issue. Then you've got the issue of like what happened with Sony, where a company of that size was brought to its knees, not for financial gains. There was no, pay me some money. Actually, there was in the early stages, but that's a whole other story we can get into, as at least my point of view of the Sony hack, based on all the data that I've had. But it took a major corporation to its knees, stopped a company from doing what it does for weeks. And here we are months later, and they are still not even probably operating at 20%.
Yeah, so absolutely.
It's pretty, imagine, if it can do it to a company of that size, one of the discussions that I've seen has to do with the issue of, well, should the government be involved in protecting these companies? Well, I would love for the government to have a solution to that problem if it wasn't that the government has bigger problems than Sony does.
Yeah.
So, yeah, that would be great if the government actually could do something about it, other than basically attack net neutrality. And there we run into another issue of privacy and net neutrality. So it's a complex issue, it's a complex matter, and it's really one that, again, we have to realize that the solution to the problem is not in the technologies, in thinking, oh, well, let's do like China and filter all of our traffic.
It's not only in the technology. The people, the process, and the technology are all part of that.
They're all part of that. And too often times the perception by those who are in the management, executive management roles, are oftentimes that in the technology to solve this issue. And we need to, I think the important thing about, what you do with your events and what we're doing on this call right now and on the show is all about really bringing more awareness and more understanding to the issue. And I think only then or the issues, right? And I think only then are we going to be in a position to create proper solutions that really address, like you said, the people, the process, and the technology. The technology is the easiest to address, but usually just addressing the technology can create bigger problems. They can create bigger problems in the process, and they can create bigger problems with the people.
Yeah.
So we have to take a different approach than the way we've been looking at security.
Well said. Well, and it's hard when you have so many different types of technologies available and security companies who do, the cyber security, world, and it's hard when government and healthcare organizations are selecting those best-of-breed solutions. So, a topic for another day, my friend. But this has been really exciting, Ralph. I appreciate it. I don't want to keep you from the set of Oliver Stone's movie. So let's wrap it up. And I definitely would love to have you back as a guest again soon. And you have so many stories to share. So I really appreciate it. And thanks again for having me.
Oh, it's my pleasure. I'm very, very passionate about computers and technology, and even more passionate about passing it on and passing the knowledge on and passing, and to make a real difference. I think we all have to, learn to talk to each other and educate each other about the different things we all bring to the table.
Yeah, agreed. Well said. Well said. Well, thanks again, and we'll talk soon.
Thank you so much for having me, Kelly. Always a pleasure.
Tune in for our next monthly Third Thursday podcast series, Off the Record with GTRA. Make sure you save the date for our GTRA and Health Tech Council Summit, June 28th through 30th in Gettysburg, Pennsylvania, as well as our 5th Annual Converge Tech Awards, a recognition for technology leaders and innovators from government, healthcare, finance, and energy. Remember to nominate your peers and attend the Black Tie Awards Gala, where we announce the winners in a very exciting and dramatic envelope opening Oscar style. Also, be sure to save the date for our fall Secure Gov and Secure Health Council Summit, November 15th through 17th at the Homestead Resort in Virginia. Again, I'm your host, Kelly Yoko, and I look forward to your topic ideas, feedback, and suggested podcast participants. So feel free to reach out to me directly at kelly@gtra.org.